Welcome back to the deep dive.
All right.
Sometimes in football you get these matches that just look like a sure thing on paper, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then they get on the pitch and it's a totally different story.
Completely.
So today we're diving into one of those head scratchers. Newcastle United's loss to Bournemouth.
Okay.
You sent us some really passionate fan commentary about this match, and we are here to figure out what went wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got analysis from two Newcastle fans coming from two different perspectives on this shocking defeat. I mean, Newcastle was on a 9-game winning streak, comfortably sitting in 4th place. Bournemouth, dealing with a ton of injuries, was playing with a seriously depleted squad. So how did they pull off this 4-1 upset?
Yeah. That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
Let's dive into those fan reactions and see what clues we can uncover.
Okay.
So both commentators are clearly in shock.
For sure.
Newcastle were heavily favored to win, and these fans sound like they were expecting a dominant performance.
Yeah.
Especially against a weakened Bournemouth side.
Right. But what's interesting is how both commentators acknowledge Bournemouth's incredible effort. They were playing with such energy, tactical discipline, pressing relentlessly.
Right.
And just disrupting Newcastle's flow.
Yeah. The first commentator even calls out Philip Billing from Bournemouth.
Oh, really?
Saying he gave them hell throughout the game. He was really impressed with how Bournemouth players got on their faces and disrupted their rhythm. And the second commentator uses words like phenomenal and exceptional to describe Bournemouth's performance.
Wow.
So you have to give credit where credit is due. Bournemouth really stepped up and took advantage of whatever weaknesses they saw in Newcastle.
Definitely.
Okay, so Bournemouth exceeded expectations, no doubt.
Yeah.
But what about Newcastle?
Right.
Why the lackluster performance from a team that was on such a hot streak?
Well, both fans expressed deep frustration with Newcastle's play, pointing to sloppy passing, a failure to create scoring chances.
Right.
And some key players just looking off their game. Do you think it was a tactical issue or just a bad day at the office?
I'm leaning towards a bit of both. I mean, listen to how the first commentator describes it. He says, some of our passing was absolutely dreadful. Set pieces. My God, they were dreadful. Really, really dreadful. We just could not string passes together.
Wow.
We couldn't get anything going. That sounds like more than just a few missed passes.
It does, doesn't it? And the second commentator echoes that sentiment, saying the passing was horrific.
Oh, wow.
And that Alexander Isak, their star striker who's been on fire lately, couldn't get a sniff, could not get in the game.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like Newcastle forgot how to play the beautiful game.
They did.
They had been displaying for weeks. What do you make of that?
Well, that's where the fatigue question comes in, right? They had been playing a lot of matches.
Yeah.
Could that have contributed to their sloppy play?
Yeah.
The first commentator seems to completely reject that idea, though.
Really?
Yeah, he's adamant that fatigue isn't an excuse, saying that these players are super fit athletes. Instead, he believes the players were complacent and underestimated Bournemouth. He even goes as far as saying Newcastle needs better squad depth and urges the owners to go out and buy some players.
Wow.
So he's basically calling for better bench strength.
Okay.
Arguing that Newcastle needs players who can come off the bench and make a real impact. Interesting. What's the second commentator's take on this?
He seems less certain about the fatigue factor. He even wonders if the players were expecting an easy win and didn't bring the necessary intensity. But ultimately, he calls the team's performance pathetic, which suggests he's leaning more towards a lack of effort or focus.
Okay, so we have two very different perspectives here. Was it fatigue, complacency?
Yeah.
A bit of both? Or something else entirely?
Yeah.
I guess that's what makes football so captivating, right?
It is.
These complex questions with no easy answers.
Exactly. And it's these nuances that we're going to unpack as we continue our deep dive. Now let's talk about some of the individual player performances. Because there were some standout, or rather sit-down performances that really deserve a closer look.
For sure, one player that comes to mind immediately is Bruno Guimaraes.
Oh, yeah.
He scored Newcastle's only goal, but also committed a costly turnover that led directly to a Bournemouth goal.
Right. And the first commentator didn't hold back, calling that turnover criminal.
Ouch, that's a strong word.
It is.
But I can understand the frustration. Bruno is a fan favorite and such a key player for Newcastle.
Definitely.
Seeing him make such a basic error in a game where they were already struggling must have been tough to swallow.
Yeah, definitely. It highlights how even the best players can have off days, especially against a team like Bournemouth that was clearly playing with a chip on their shoulder.
Now, on the flip side, Nick Pope was absolutely brilliant in goal for Newcastle.
He was.
Both commentators agree that without his saves, the scoreline could have been even more embarrassing.
Oh, for sure.
He was definitely one of the few bright spots for Newcastle on a very dark day. But you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
Neither commentator mentions Alan St. Maximin or Miguel Almiron.
That is strange.
They're two of Newcastle's most dangerous attackers. Were they injured, rested, or simply ineffective?
Yeah.
Again, their absence just adds another layer to this mystery of Newcastle's poor performance.
It does, and unfortunately, these commentaries don't give us any answers on that front. But what they do tell us is that this loss is a huge blow to Newcastle. It's not just about ending their winning streak, it's about exposing potential weaknesses that other teams might try to exploit.
Right, and the second commentator makes that point very clear. He says, Bournemouth are a point behind us now. There has to be a huge reaction for the next game. Otherwise, we've seen how congested that league table is. It won't take much for us to slip back down.
He's not sugarcoating it.
Yeah.
This loss could derail their entire season. The pressure is on now for Newcastle to prove this was just a blip.
Well, this deep dive has turned into a real puzzle, hasn't it?
It has.
We've got a dominant team falling apart, a struggling team pulling off a stunning upset, and more questions than answers about what really went wrong.
And that's why we love analyzing football. It's unpredictable, it's emotional, and it always keeps us guessing.
This is just the beginning of our deep dive into this Newcastle meltdown.
Yeah.
We still need to unpack the tactical side of things, dig deeper into those individual player performances, and explore what this loss means for Newcastle moving forward.
I can't wait.
Stay with us as we continue to break down this fascinating match and see what other insights we can uncover from these passionate fan commentaries.
Oh, sure.
All right, so we've established that Newcastle's performance was way off, and Bournemouth deserves a ton of credit for their win. But let's dig a bit deeper into the tactical side of things. Do you think there were any specific tactical decisions or formations that might have contributed to Newcastle's struggles?
Well, remember how both commentators mentioned Bournemouth's relentless pressing?
Right.
That high-energy, aggressive style seemed to really disrupt Newcastle's passing game. They just couldn't get into any sort of rhythm.
You know, the first commentator described Newcastle's passing as dreadful. That's a pretty strong word. Do you think that could have been a result of Bournemouth's pressing, forcing them into making bad decisions?
Absolutely. When you're constantly under pressure, you don't have as much time to think to pick out the right pass.
Right.
It leads to rush decisions, misplaced passes, and ultimately a breakdown in your attacking flow.
And the second commentator pointed out that Isak, who's been scoring for fun lately, was completely shut down. Couldn't get a sniff, he said. Could that be another result of Bournemouth's defensive tactics?
It's very likely. If Bournemouth was focused on denying Newcastle space and time on the ball, it would make sense that a player like Isak, who relies on his movement and quickness, would struggle to find any room to operate.
So it seems like Bournemouth's game plan was spot on.
It really does.
They identified Newcastle's strengths, their passing and attacking flair, and effectively neutralized them.
Exactly. It was a classic case of a well-prepared, motivated underdog outsmarting a team that might have underestimated them.
Now let's circle back to individual player performances for a moment. We talked about Bruno's costly turnover, but the first commentator had another really interesting observation about him. He said, as much as fantastic as he is, you cannot lose the ball in that position.
That comment really stood out to me, too. It speaks to the high standards expected of a player like Bruno.
Right.
He's usually so reliable, so composed on the ball. But this mistake highlights how crucial those moments of concentration are, especially in a tight game.
It's a reminder that even world-class players are human. They make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes have big consequences.
Precisely. And it feeds into a larger theme that emerges from these commentaries, shattered expectations. Newcastle fans had gotten so used to seeing their team win and win convincingly that this loss feels almost like a betrayal.
Yeah, the second commentator really captures that sentiment. He says, Bournemouth are a point behind us now. There has to be a huge reaction for the next game. Otherwise, we've seen how congested that league table is. It won't take much for us to slip back down.
He's not sugarcoating it. This loss could derail their entire season. The pressure is on now for Newcastle to prove this was just a blip.
So what can Newcastle do to bounce back? What changes need to be made? Both commentators seem to agree that manager Eddie Howe needs to shake things up.
The first commentator explicitly calls for more squad depth. He wants the owners to invest in players who can come off the bench and make a difference. He even suggests that some of the current players might not be good enough to compete at the highest level.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement. Do you think he has a point? Would a few more impact substitutes have made a difference in a game like this?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's a valid point. A deeper squad gives you more tactical options, allows you to rest players without sacrificing quality, and creates healthy competition for starting spots.
Right. The second commentator doesn't delve into specifics about player personnel, but he emphasizes the need for a huge reaction in the next game.
Yeah.
He wants to see a team that's hungry, motivated, and ready to prove that this loss was just a fluke.
He's talking about mentality as much as tactics. Can Newcastle shake off this defeat and rediscover the confidence and intensity that brought them so much success earlier in the season? That's the big question hanging over them now.
It's a crucial moment for Newcastle. They need to show their fans and their opponents that they're capable of learning from their mistakes and coming back stronger.
Absolutely. They need to show that they have the resilience and determination to overcome adversity and get their season back on track.
This deep dive has been so fascinating. We've uncovered tactical insights, analyzed player performances, and explored the emotional impact of this unexpected loss. It really feels like we've gone beyond the headlines and gained a much deeper understanding of what transpired in that match.
Right. And it all comes back to those passionate fan commentaries you shared with us.
Yes.
They've provided such valuable insights and perspectives. They've allowed us to really delve into the heart of this Newcastle meltdown.
We're not done yet, though. We still need to explore what this loss means for Newcastle moving forward and what challenges they might face in the coming weeks. And we'll do that right after this quick break. Stay with us. Okay, we're back, and we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've analyzed the tactical battle, dissected individual player performances, and explored the emotional roller coaster that Newcastle fans went through during this unexpected defeat.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
We've gone from shock and disbelief to a more nuanced understanding of what went wrong for Newcastle and what Bournemouth did so well.
So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways?
Okay.
What can we learn from Newcastle's stunning loss to Bournemouth?
I think the biggest takeaway is that in football, as in life, complacency can be a dangerous thing. Newcastle, on their 9-game winning streak, might have underestimated Bournemouth, and they paid the price for that. It's a good reminder that you can't take anything for granted no matter how strong you think you are.
It's a classic case of a team being caught sleeping. And Bournemouth deserves a lot of credit for seizing the opportunity. They came into the match with a clear game plan, played with intensity and discipline, and exploited Newcastle's weaknesses.
Exactly. They were the hungrier team, the more determined team, and it showed on the pitch. And it also raises questions about Newcastle's ability to handle pressure and maintain consistency. Can they bounce back from this setback? Do they have the mental fortitude to regain their winning form?
Those are the million-dollar questions, aren't they? And what's really interesting is how both commentators, despite their obvious disappointment, still seem to believe in Newcastle.
It's true. They're critical of the performance, but they're not giving up hope. The first commentator even ends his analysis on a somewhat optimistic note. He reminds the fans that losing is a part of football and that this one defeat shouldn't dictate their season.
He's urging them to forget about this match and focus on the next one. He's calling for unity and reminding everyone that the team needs the support of its fans, especially during tough times.
And that's what makes true fans, isn't it? They're there for the highs and the lows, offering constructive criticism, but never losing sight of the bigger picture.
Well said. So for you, listener, we leave you with this thought. Do you think this loss was a wake-up call for Newcastle? Will it serve as a catalyst for them to regroup, refocus, and come back stronger? Or was it a sign of deeper problems, cracking the foundation that could derail their entire season?
Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, this match has added another layer of intrigue to Newcastle's journey. It's going to be fascinating to see how they respond to this setback in the weeks to come.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've uncovered so much more than just the final score. We've gained a real understanding of the tactical nuances, the emotional impact, and the bigger questions surrounding this match.
It just goes to show that even in a game as seemingly straightforward as football, there's always more to discover, always another layer to peel back.
And that's what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to spark your curiosity and challenge your perspectives. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.